Some closing remarks, and then I'll close.
Mr. Chairman, thank you for a fascinating hearing, and all of our colleagues and the witnesses for hanging with us. You know, I taught constitutional law and the First Amendment for 25 years, Mr. Chairman, and I used to tell my students that the First Amendment's like an apple, and everybody wants to take one bite out of the apple. Somebody doesn't like left-wing speech, take a bite. Somebody doesn't like right-wing speech, take a bite. Somebody doesn't like DEI speech, take a bite. Somebody doesn't like gender ideology speech, take a bite. And everybody takes just one bite out of the apple, and at the end of it, you know what's left? Nothing. The apple's gone. It's been gobbled away, which means that we've got a responsibility to defend free speech in its entirety. Now, the hearing we've had today has been fascinating in a lot of ways. I do think that it ran roughshod over some basic constitutional distinctions that we do talk about in the First Amendment, like whether we're in a public forum or a non-public forum, a limited public forum, a private space, and all of that somewhat got stampeded in the political theatrics at different points. But one thing that struck me was the fundamental agnosticism I hear from a lot of my colleagues about whether something called the truth even exists anymore. And we are the products of an Enlightenment constitution by people who really believed in the idea of facts and empirical investigation. In fact, our entire judicial system is based on that idea. When people go and testify in court, they swear to tell the truth, the whole truth, and nothing but the truth. And then we have whole standards of evidence that are organized around whether or not the case has been made. In criminal court, have you been able to prove the facts so intensely that it's beyond any reasonable doubt? Or in civil court, by a preponderance of the evidence. And so our judicial system is based on the idea that there is the truth. If you think about it, Mr. Chairman, our democratic system is based on the idea that there's the truth. I heard people today and in other contexts saying, well, no, we don't want to take down Russian disinformation on social media sites telling people to go and vote on Wednesday, November 9th, if the election is Tuesday, November 8th. That's a violation of free speech, as opposed to just a lie and a fraud perpetrated on the public. But think about it. We don't have democracy if we don't have a concept of truth and the facts, because at the end of the day, Donald Trump might not like it, but there is an election and somebody wins and somebody loses, and he couldn't handle the fact that he lost in 2020 for whatever reasons, financial, ideological, psychological, emotional, I don't know. He lost by more than 7 million votes, 306 to 232 in the election. And the vexed politics and the divided, polarized culture of our time all has to do with his inability to accept that, and then his inciting a violent mob to come and attack our police officers and wound them and hospitalize them and tear the country apart. But the reality is, at the end of every election, we decide the fact of who won and who lost. And the inability to accept facts and the idea that there are truths is a very dangerous thing for American democracy or any other democracy. And I'll just say finally, Mr. Chairman, there's an attack going on the media. I'm sorry that some of my colleagues didn't deal with the fact that, yes, President Trump has started to ban this media entity, to punish these various newspaper groups, to bring lawsuits for tens of millions of dollars on totally bogus, fraudulent defamation charges, and then forcing those media entities to settle with him as a form of financial and political tribute to the state. What is this? Castro's Cuba? North Korea? Come on. Could we get together on a bipartisan basis to reject that? Do we really have to be so stuck in our partisan encampments that we can't see that as a shakedown by the state against the people? So let's stand up for real, if we could, in this Congress, Mr. Chairman, for the freedom of speech, for the freedom of press, for the right to petition government for a redress of grievances, for the freedom of assembly, for the free exercise of a religion, and for no establishment of a religion. Let's at least converge around that. And I thank you for your indulgence, and I yield back to you.
Gentleman yields back. I would just say, first of all, thank you all for being here. Just in response briefly, I'm all for getting the facts and the truth. And the way you get there is robust debate. It's the First Amendment. Ms. Crockett quoted scripture. There's a great scripture, I think it's in Proverbs. It says, the first to present his case seems right until another comes along and questions him. It's called the principle of cross-examination. That's basically the First Amendment. One person says one thing, another person says something else, and we can figure out the truth and the facts. If you're just getting one side, and again, from left or right in a political context, that's the problem. I'm for the full apple, to use your metaphor. What I know is, I don't know Mr. Aaron's background, but I know these three people, for defending the full apple, to use your metaphor again, they've been harassed for doing it. Mr. Taibbi had the IRS knock on his door, for goodness sake. He had a Democrat member of Congress threaten to refer him to the Justice Department for prosecution, for goodness sake. Mr. Schellenberger's a wanted man in Brazil for standing up for the truth, for the facts. In fact, I'm going to ask a question here. Ms. Subramanya, I know what you did during the trucker blockade. I know how you've testified. I know. My guess, I don't know specifically, my guess you've been harassed and targeted as well for your defense of the truth and the full apple, to stick with Mr. Raskin's.
Absolutely. A few months after I wrote my story for the Free Press on the truckers' protest, in June of 2022, I found myself in a study on a list of people, people where the author, a professor at a university in Calgary, which is a city in the province of Alberta, a federally funded study basically was accusing me of spreading Russian disinformation.
Yeah.
That's extraordinary. And I was featured on this list with Tulsi Gabbard and a bunch of other...
Yeah, we know that whole spiel.
Yeah, and so when I saw my name on this list, I was absolutely horrified, because that is the chilling effect of...
So here are three individuals who value the First Amendment and the truth so much that they're willing to face the attacks that they've faced, value the freedom of the press, freedom of speech, the rights we enjoy as Americans. So I want to thank you all for being here. You included Mr. Aaron, but I especially want to thank you three.
Thank you.
Because it's been I know over the last several years, what you've had to endure, and your willingness to come back again, and we're going to have you back again at some point, because I don't think 9 hearings is enough on the First Amendment. I think, as Mr. Grothman said, we should do this every single week, because if you lose the First Amendment, you lose the right to debate, everything else falls apart, just the way it works. And so, again, thank you all for being here today. The committee is adjourned. Thank you.